When you hear the word Afghanistan, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's probably conflict. But that's really just one chapter in a story that's thousands of years old. This is a nation that has been this vibrant crossroads for empires, for cultures, and for ideas. So to really get a handle on it, we've got to look past the headlines and dive into its deep and very complex history. And this quote from an Afghan emir more than 100 years ago, wow, it just nails the central problem for Afghanistan. It paints this incredible, vivid picture of a nation that's always been caught between bigger, more powerful forces, a strategic piece of land that empires have just always wanted to control. So all of that constant pressure, it's forged a nation that is just full of these amazing paradoxes. I mean, how can one place be both a global hub for culture and a graveyard for armies? These two powerful and seemingly contradictory identities are what really define Afghanistan. And here is where you see that tension play out. On one hand, you have the crossroads of Asia, a place buzzing with energy, where goods, religions, and cultures all mixed for centuries. It even gave rise to huge empires like the Mughals. But then you flip it over, and it's earned this other name, the graveyard of empires, a place where the mightiest powers on earth have been fought to a total standstill, often broken by its brutal landscape and its fiercely independent people. Look, you don't get a nickname like that by accident. It's the result of this relentless, centuries-long pattern of invasion and incredible resistance, a story that's been carved into the very mountains and valleys of the country for thousands of years. I mean, just look at this timeline. It reads like a who's who of world history. You've got the Persian Empire, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan. They all marched through these lands. But notice what starts to happen in the last few centuries. In 1747, the modern state of Afghanistan is born under the Durrani Empire, which managed to unify a lot of the Pashtun tribes. And that really marks a shift because it leads right into a whole new kind of struggle, first with the British Empire and then with the superpowers of our modern era. That conflict with Britain came to be called the Great Game. And that phrase just perfectly captures Afghanistan's geopolitical curse. It was the critical buffer state, the pawn on the chessboard that neither the British over in India nor the expanding Russian Empire could let the other one control. For these global powers, Afghanistan's own independence, well, that was often an afterthought. This whole history of foreign intervention really sets the stage for the modern era, kicking off this relentless cycle of war that has come to define life for generations of Afghans. And that brings us to a year that changed everything, 1979. The Soviet Union invades to prop up a struggling communist government. Now, this act doesn't just start a brutal decade-long war, it kicks off a completely new chapter of foreign intervention that would go on to shape the country for the next 40 years. The cost of this war was just catastrophic. I mean, try to wrap your head around these numbers. Up to 2 million Afghans killed, another 6 million forced to become refugees. But beyond the sheer numbers, it left this devastating legacy. It created a society just flooded with weapons, where power shifted from traditional elders to heavily armed warlords. This war didn't just scar Afghanistan, it fundamentally rewired it. So, after the Soviets pulled out, you'd hope for peace, right? Nope. Instead, a vicious civil war between those very warlords just tore the country apart. And out of that chaos, a new force emerged, one that promised to bring order. In 1996, the Taliban captured Kabul and established their first Islamic emirate. 5 years later, the world pivots on its axis on September 11th. The United States, in response to the attacks, led an invasion to overthrow the Taliban for sheltering al-Qaeda. And that decision marks the beginning of another 2-decade-long war for Afghanistan. And that 20-year war, well, it ended with shocking speed in 2021. As the last of the US and NATO forces were pulling out, the Taliban just swept back across the country, capturing Kabul and reestablishing the Islamic Emirate for a second time. And the human cost of this most recent chapter was, once again, just immense. Over 176,000 people lost their lives, a staggering number that includes tens of thousands of ordinary civilians who were just caught in the crossfire. So after all this turmoil, all this history, what does Afghanistan actually look like today? Beyond the wars, who are the people living there, and what's their reality on the ground? Okay, first, it is absolutely crucial to understand that Afghanistan is not some monolithic country. It's this rich, complex mosaic of different ethnic groups. Pashtuns are the largest group, sure, but you have huge populations of Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, and many others. And each one has its own language, its own culture, and its own historical grievances. which, as you can imagine, has often played a huge role in the country's internal politics. This right here reveals another one of Afghanistan's biggest paradoxes: its wealth. The land is sitting on an estimated $1 trillion in minerals like lithium and copper, just incredible potential. But the economic reality for the people living there could not be more different. With a GDP per capita of just over $400, it is still one of the poorest and least developed countries on the entire planet. So what is life like under the Taliban today? Well, it's a complicated and, frankly, often contradictory picture. The government is not recognized by pretty much any other country, and when foreign aid was cut off, it triggered a massive economic crisis. At the same time, we hear widespread reports of human rights violations, especially these severe restrictions on women's lives and their education. And yet, some reports also show a dramatic drop in opium poppy cultivation and a noticeable improvement in the country's corruption rankings. It's a situation with no easy answers at all. And all of this brings us to the fundamental question. After centuries of being a pawn in other people's games, what does the future actually hold for Afghanistan? The poet Allama Iqbal once described Afghanistan as the heart of Asia. What he meant was what happens here doesn't just stay here. The stability, or the instability, of Afghanistan has always sent ripples out, affecting the entire region and really the entire world. So where does that leave us? Well, we have this legacy, one that's been defined by the push and pull of empires. We have a diverse and incredibly resilient people who have endured just unimaginable hardship. And we have the central challenge of their lifetime, breaking this centuries-long cycle of conflict. All of which boils down to one ultimate question: who gets to write the next chapter of Afghanistan's story? For centuries, Afghanistan's destiny has been influenced and often dictated by outsiders. The question that remains, the one that will shape the heart of Asia for years to come, is whether its future will finally, truly, be written by Afghans themselves.